So let's move back to the structure of a feed-forward neural network. So this is something we have seen. So it has layers and layers of aggregation and activation. And now given a image like this. So given this two-dimensional data, you want to predict, well, that's number two. Well, if you have something like this, where you want to predict, that's number three, something like that. Well, but it's two-dimensional data. One difference is, well, your model is only able to accept one-dimensional input. So to fill this discrepancy, well, one thing we can do is processing the data. The process is called as flattening. So from two-dimensional data, you take the first line and move it over here. Second line, move it over here. Third line, move it over here, and so on. So eventually, this two-dimensional sort of matrix of data is becoming one-dimensional data. And since it's one-dimensional data, you can directly feed into feed-forward neural network. So this is the sort of traditional way to deal with image data in early computing. So you could do that, and that will give you certain level of accuracy. But it's an image data, and especially thinking of handwritten digit, where you have small box. And from here, speaking of writing down number one, it could be like this. Or some guy would write one in this way, whereas someone would like this way. So the difference between them is the angle of this digit is different from one to the other. So the image over here is representing the rotation of the data. So it's an image, and depending on how you represent the data, it could be rotated to a certain degree. Well, if you do so, well, your model, especially if you model with feed-forward neural network, well, there is a process two-dimensional data, it flattened into one-dimensional data, and your feed-forward neural network cannot react to this kind of rotation properly. So if your data is rotated a certain degree, your model would behave strangely. Well, speaking of image data, every image data is something like this. So it's basically two-dimensional data, and there is a sort of special dependency. So in terms of geometry, well, those closure pixels, they probably relate to the other, where you want to consider neighborhood of each pixel, and you also want to consider the continuation of those pixels. Maybe this cat is rotated to left or right to a certain degree, but at the same time, your model could understand the image as is. So your model wants to be invariant against the rotation. The model for the image, again, originated from the understanding of our brain. So what's happening around the 1950, they wired cat brain with some kind of electrical devices, and they tried to get the electrical signal from the brain. At the same time, they showed a TV screen to the cat and monitored the behavior of the brain. And they continuously show some kind of stimulus from the screen. So where there is some object on the screen and cat is watching that. And at the same time, they were monitoring the behavior happening on the cat brain. From there, the researchers found that there is some kind of relationship between the neighborhood of the understanding of this geometry. Well, basically, the cat was watching the screen, and when the cat saw something on the screen, the researchers could observe the synaptic communication within the visual part of the brain. From this experiment, they found there are cells that take care of simple low-level information, and there are other cells take care of complex high-level information. Simple cells detect only local activities, so if you draw an imaginary grid, simple cell only takes care of one spot on the grid. Complex cells take care of summary information from the simple cells that are neighboring each other. So we're based on this high-level understanding of brain action. Fukushima early AD introduced a model called neocognitron. And the idea is quite similar to today's convolutional neural network. So where it gets the information and operates with some kind of patch-like operator and summarize the information from two-dimensional grid. And there is some kind of a summarization step, and that is repeating over and over in terms of layers. So eventually, Jan LeCun introduced a model classifying the human handwritten digits. So this is the data, and they collected over 50,000 of these handwritten digits. And each of these digits formed a data instance like this. And early trial was based on what we have discussed already. So they tried to flatten the data and send it to feedforward neural network. But like we discussed, this was weak against rotation of the data. So this model understood this is 2, but at the same time, well, the model did not know this is 2 or something like that. So to make the model invariant to the rotation, Jan LeCun introduced the use of convolutional kernel. And then there is another operator that is called as pooling. Here comes a detailed explanation of convolution. So you have given some image. So this is your input image. And this image is sent to some operator that is a convolutional operator. So this dark square that is moving around is a convolution operator. So this convolution operator is summarizing this 3x3 area of the image. So each time the output goes to the other side. So first 3x3 is sort of summarized as one number. Next 3x3 data is sort of summarized in the next neighboring pixel. Next one is and so on. So eventually you have originally 555 image. You're summarizing them into 3x3. You sort of summarize the image. So this slide explains the operation of convolution more in detail. So this matrix in the middle is a kernel for convolution, and we are going to apply it to the image matrix that is on the left. After an application of convolution, you're going to get a new matrix called as the feature map. And the kernel has an alias name, feature detector, and you can think of this left and right of the feature detector as input and output. So the convolution operation is basically an inner product between a small part of the image and the kernel. For example, let's take a look at the first 3x3 elements of the input image. So if you take the inner product of it and the kernel, you're going to get 0, as you see on the first cell on the output matrix. Moving the 3x3 window one step to the right on the input image, you're going to get 1 from the inner product and so on. So by sweeping this simple inner product operation over the input image, your convolution operation is proceeded. So we have seen the operation of convolution, and the convolution operation was defined by a kernel. Then what does a kernel represent? So the idea is actually coming from long time ago. So where before computer vision, there was a discipline that is called as image processing. So turn the image to certain shape or certain, to turn to certain characteristics. So the idea here is, well, here is your input image, and you want to get the outline of the image. Well, getting the outline of the input image looks complicated, but that's actually very simple in terms of matrix operation, because if you have this kind of patch or kernel, and if you convolute this on the input image, you will get the outline of the input image. So, well, depending on the value you have in the corner, well, you will get this kind of output. Well, here is a similar example. So basically, the operation is the same as the previous example. But here, you have different numbers in the corner. And if you use this corner and convolute it on the input image, you will get a blurred image. So previously, the corner was filled with negative ones and only one positive number in the middle. And this corner is filled with fractional numbers, but the largest in the middle. And second largest is around the square. And the smallest number on the corners of the square. So what I'm trying to tell you is, well, this idea of running the corner and running the convolution operator on the image, well, that was from long time ago. That is from coming from image processing. And depending on the value you have in the convolution operator or corner, you will get different output. In the image processing, though, people will try to define this corner manually. So this specific type of corner has a name. So this is a Gaussian corner. And it has been known that Gaussian corner blurs the image. And what people change is with CNN, well, we don't want to define this manually. So image processing people define this manually. What CNN changed, we don't want to define the content of the corner manually. Instead, we want to learn it from the data. And at the same time, there was a pooling operator. Pooling operator is, well, nothing but the downsampling of the input image. So if you send your image to pooling operator, well, your original image becomes smaller. And the operation is very simple. So out of this 4x4 matrix, divide the matrix into 4 of 2x2 areas and pick the maximum out of it. So 20, 30, 112, and 37. Then it will effectively downsize your original image. Because you are taking the maximum out of each area, this is called as max pooling. There is an alternative that is taking the average out of this 2x2 region. Either way, you can downsize your original input to a certain size of a smaller image. So in terms of learning, well, we studied two operators, convolution operator, the other is pool operator. In terms of learning, there is a parameter to run. On this side, by the way, there is no running parameter. So CNN is basically repetition of convolution operator and pool operator. And the idea is if you do this multiple times, somehow you will get a better representation of your original image. Or building model. Well, this is the illustration of one of the famous work in CNN. So this has been published like, well, long time ago, like about 30 years ago. And MNIST data set is this handwritten data. And this model, introduced in 1989, it has two convolution layers. So it has interplay between convolution and pool, convolution and pool. And at the end of the day, it is flattened using these two repetition of this convolution and pooling. And this flattened representation is somehow better represent to predict what is each of these images showing in terms of the numerical value.